Hey there, it's Olivia Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm not in my usual location because I am in the Netherlands with my Red Books collection. So fairly recently, from when I'm filming this, I counted all of my books and I found out that I have about 1,400 something books, which is quite a lot of books, and I decided it's time to do a bit of a clear out and unhaul books. But in this unhaul, I'm only unhauling books I've read before or that I have duplicates of. I've split this unhaul into sections. We're going to start with my duplicates, then we're going to move to adult fiction, then to young adult, then to graphics and poetry and middle grade, and then we're going to finish on a couple of random titles. It's going to be a very informal video. I'm hoping to whiz through it because I have 75 books here that I'm unhauling. Let's get down to the books that will be leaving my shelves. The first duplicate, you're going to hear this a lot in this duplicate section, is Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes, which I have not read but I have in hardcover, which is a special edition Waterstone, so I don't need this proof anymore. I also have the proof of Maame by Jessica George, which I recently read and really enjoyed, but I do not need a double proof, and I know that my sister wants to read this one. We have The Marriage Act by John Mars, which I have in proof but I now also have in hardback, even though I have not read it yet, so I'm unhauling this. I also was sent by the publisher both the hardback and the paperback of Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. I don't need to. I've got my hardback, and my mum recently watched the TV series and really liked it, so she wants to read this, so that's why this is going. I have a proof of 1,000,000 to 1 by Adiba Jaigirdar. They also sent me a finished copy of this, so I don't need this proof. I won in a giveaway before I got the paperback finished copy, The Boy Who Steals Houses by C.G. Drews. I unfortunately still have not read this, but I do have a finished copy, so I'm unhauling the proof for now. I was sent the hardback of The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune by Hannah from Perusing Hannah, and I love this book. I gave it 5 stars. It has my whole heart. I just do not need 2 copies, even though I love it, especially as I have 2 copies of most of his books because he signed all of my proofs and none of my finished copies at the time that he came. So I'm going to give this to my best friend who absolutely loves this book as well with her whole heart, and she'll be very happy to have a copy because she's been listening to all of these on audiobook, wants to collect them but doesn't let me buy her books new. I can only give her books secondhand, and therefore this is secondhand. I have a double copy of Patron Saints of Nothing by Randy Ribay. I took Hannah's finished copy of this, which I really like the cover of. I read this in proof in 2019 when it came out and I gave it 5 stars. I love it. I think it's a fantastic depiction of grief set in the Philippines, and fantastic. I've also got this exclusive edition proof with shiny foil on it of The List by Yomi Adegoke, which I've already read and I really enjoyed, and I supported this one on release. I just do not need 2 copies, even though this is proof 140 out of 200 and signed by the author. I did meet the author, my hardback is signed. I just need 1 copy of the book. Unhauling this proof of Bookshops and Bonedust by Baldree. I have a finished copy. I don't need the proof. Unhauling this finished paperback of Skandar and the Unicorn Thief by A.F. Steadman. I got this because I was doing some work with the Booksellers Association for the Indie Book Awards, or no, this one was for the Reader Book Awards, I think, and I already had this in hardback. I really did love it, and I'm going to continue the series and everything. I just have book 1 and 2 in hardback, so I don't need to keep the paperback. I think this might go onto my nephew's shelves for in the future. I love sending his parents books. I'm like, put this on his bookshelf. When he's old enough to read it, he will love it, so that's where that's going. I also have a proof of Excuse Me While I Ugly Cry by Joya Goffney. I gave this 5 stars. I absolutely loved this young adult contemporary. I think it's really good, and I've got a finished copy, so I don't need to keep the proof. I bought a finished copy, that's how much I love it. I've got a double copy of The Great Alone by Kristin. Her books are being like reissued, and I have the reissue of this, so I don't need this original one. I also gave this 5 stars. I really love it. I have the proof of Maybe I Don't Belong Here by David Harewood. I would love to give this to one of my sisters. It's a non-fiction book. It deals with blackness and racism in the UK specifically, and mental health, and it is absolutely fantastic. It's a memoir. David Harewood is amazing, and I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. It was on my best books of the year list when I read it, and so I really hope this falls into someone's hands who will greatly enjoy it. I've got White Smoke by Tiffany D. Jackson. I took a hardcover from Hannah's Unhaul again, so I don't need to keep this proof. I do like to replace my proofs with finished copies whenever I can afford to, or can figure out a way to get my hands on a finished copy. or if the publisher doesn't send one. Sometimes the publisher sends one anyway. And yeah, I will be giving this one to Simi because she really wanted to read it after I talked about how good it was, so I will be passing that along to her. She's been enjoying black horror lately. She really liked You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight, so I'm very excited to be able to pass this swiftly along. I've also got a proof of Thief, Liar, Lady by D.L. Soria. This is a retelling of Cinderella. I have not read this. I do have a finished copy, so in hardback, so this is going. I also have 2 copies of Beloved by Toni Morrison. I love this, 5 stars, one of my favourite books of all time, and it still stands as my favourite Toni Morrison at the moment. I'm reading my way through her works. I've already read this one, but I bought a complete set where they all match, and so I have 2 copies of this now. Simi really wants to read this after I keep raving about it, so this is going to Simi. She's going to love a little haul from this. I now have a double copy of Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi because this one came out in hardback with a sprayed edge and the publisher sent it my way to talk about it on my stories and raise awareness about it, so I don't need my paperback copy anymore because I have too many books. I have a proof of Yellowface by RF Kuang. I have this in finished copy. I have not read it yet. It's actually here with me so I can read it on holiday, and I think somebody else will really want this proof, so it'd be nice to do a trade, I don't know, or just donate it somewhere. We shall see. I also have a proof of Burn by Patrick Ness, and I also have a finished hardback of it, so I don't need to. I love Patrick Ness's books. I have not read this one. It's his Dragon take. Me and dragons, we're a bit of a mixed bag, so we'll see how I go with Patrick Ness doing dragons, but I have complete faith in him. For doubles, I have 2 copies of Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. This is the one that I actually read along with the audiobook, and I got this from a free little library. I think most of my sisters have now read this except for Simi, so maybe I'll just like foist it upon Simi so she can read it now. But it's a near and dear one to my heart. I've got another beautiful copy of it. I absolutely love it. It's a 5-star all-time favourite read for me. Similar story with Maps of My Spectacular Bodies by Maddie Mortimer. This was one of the best books I read in the year that I read it, and it's beautiful, it's sad, it's gorgeously written, and it means so much to me. I read this and I loved it. I read the proof, and then the publisher sent me the hardback, and then I was also sent the paperback. So I have 3 copies of this. I do not need 3 copies, and the copy I like the least is the paperback. So I will be keeping my proof and keeping my hardback. Just because you see me getting rid of a lot of duplicates doesn't mean I've gotten rid of all of my duplicates. And then Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid. I was kindly sent this from Charlotte when she was unhauling it, but I do have it in proof, and I think I don't love the cover design. So even though this has sprayed edges and everything, I'm going to pass this one along, and I'm keeping my proof of it, which I like more, even though it's quite worn down and well read because it was a travelling proof. And I gave this 5 stars. I think it's fantastic. I don't think April's read it yet, so I will be giving my copy to her if she has not read it yet. So that wraps up all of my duplicates. So we can just move those over here so I've got some space. And now I'm going to talk to you about the adult books that I'm unhauling. So truthfully, this could have fallen into duplicates as well. Disorientation by Elise Hizaya Chu. I tried to read it in hardback and I DNF'd it and unhauled it, but I didn't realise I also had a proof here, so that can go. I'm also unhauling Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I read this quite a long time ago, and at the time I found it okay. I only gave it 3 stars. I found it to be quite a slow story. There's also a lot of cheating in this. I don't particularly love cheating. I think it did a very good job of talking about the culture element to it, and being black in the US, and being of like 2 different cultures and where do you fit in. I was also more of a book blogger back in the day that I read this, and the person in this has a blog, and her experience with blogging is just not the way blogging goes, so that frustrated me, but I understand how it worked for the story. I'm just going to let this one go now because I just don't feel like I need it. I didn't love this book, so I don't need to actually keep it. I'm unhauling The Boy with the Top Knot by Sathnam Sanghera. This stayed on my shelf for such a long time because it's got a bit of a personal story to it. So we studied this when I was in secondary school, and I wrote a poem that was inspired by this at the time, and my teacher loved it so much that she sent it directly to the author, and the author responded, Sathnam Sanghera, who's quite known for his non-fiction now, and he said it was fantastic, wanted to encourage me with my creative pursuits, and he found out that I had a book blog, so what he did was he sent 3 copies of the book for me to give away to on my book blog, and it was just so monumental to me, who was like this young teenager online, and it meant a lot to me, and I did like the memoir, but I don't think I need to keep it. I've just read so many memoirs since, some that I love a lot more, but it will always be like a monumental memory in my mind, and I still have the letter from Sapna and Sanghera, and that's in my like nostalgia memory box, so it's not like I'm giving away the one physical tie to that memory. Half of Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I did prefer this one to Americana. I think this is the best book of hers that I've read, and this one again had a lot of cheating in it, but it also had a lot of history that I didn't know before, and I appreciated learning that history, which is why this one has stayed for so long on my shelf. It's just like I'm not going to reread it. I'm not as passionate about her books as some other people are, so I'm just not going to keep it. As a teenager, I read The Red Necklace by Sally Gardner. It's historical fiction. I don't really remember much about it other than the fact that I absolutely loved it as a teenager. I am such a different reader now than I was back then. Back then I read so much historical fiction, and now I barely read historical fiction. Am I ever going to reread this? No. Do I remember what it's about? No. It's just time to let it go. Also, very bittersweetly, it's time to let go of The Dragons of Nova by Elise Kova. This is back when she was indie publishing her books. I really loved her books back when she was indie published. I read all of them, and I read The Alchemist of Loom on ebook for review, and then I was sent a proof of The Dragons of Nova physically, which meant a lot to me as a young teenager who was reading books in the Netherlands. Like, they would never send anything to me, but she did, and so I will always remember that. However, I read this one, and while I really liked it, I did not love it as much as the first one in the series, which felt a lot more slow burn, which is just one of the things that I absolutely love. And I love this steampunky world. I need more steampunky books in my life because it's a genre I really, really enjoy, and I just don't get to read enough. But unfortunately, I never moved on to the third one. It's been so many years, and I have to admit I never will, and so I can't just keep this one singular book on my shelf. From this series, I read Carefree Black Girls by Zeba Bray, and I really liked it. I thought it was a very good collection of essays and really insightful. I just don't need to keep it. So passing it along. How to Stop Time by Matt Haig. I feel like I've fallen out of love with Matt Haig's adult fiction lately. It's just what I need on holiday. It's there for a good time, but not for a long time. I read this in Slovenia alongside The House on the Cerulean Sea, and I loved one more than the other, but it was good. I just don't need to keep it on my shelves. I liked A Princess in Theory by Alyssa Cole. It was a really funny, enjoyable rom-com read. I'm not going to continue on with the series, I've decided, and since I'm not going to continue on, I don't need to keep it. Somebody else can really enjoy this lovely little romance read. The Art of Starting by Iona Mathieson and Romy St. Clair. This was a really insightful book just to hear about what it's like to start up a small business when you've only got £1,000 and you're working full-time another job. I think it was really inspiring to hear what they did, and as somebody who considers like content creating like a side hustle, even though like I don't hustle that hard as a side hustle, I surely could be doing more. I am focusing on other pursuits and other things, so it was just really interesting to hear what they had to say and how other businesses do it, and I took some tips and tricks from the marketing element to this. I just have a lot of books and don't have a lot of space. I've actually read Devotion by Hannah Kent, read it in paperback. I had 2 copies and hauled my paperback after reading it because I wasn't a big fan of the plot twist, and so I don't need to keep this one either. I'm unhauling it too. I'm unhauling Hamlet, Poet Unlimited by Harold Bloom. This is a non-fiction piece that talks about Hamlet quite a bit. I'm a massive Shakespeare nerd, so I appreciated reading this and seeing this perspective on Hamlet, seeing it in a different light. I'm just not keeping it because I have a lot of Shakespeare books. The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton. I ummed and awed about this for quite a while because I liked this one when I read it, and this was me reading it after my historical fiction love moment had passed, so it's pretty impressive that I read a historical fiction and I liked it. But she is a white author who uses the N-word, and I have one other book by Jessie Burton that I liked more, which is The Confession, which I've kept on my shelf, but this one is going. It's a bit bittersweet saying goodbye to Odell's Fall by Norman Bacall. This is an indie published retelling of Othello. I feel like I have not read any other retellings of Othello since. I would really like to read another one. I think it's a fantastic Shakespeare play that needs more retellings. Everybody take note. And this was kind of set in a law firm, and I loved it. I think it did a really good job with doing the retelling of Othello. It was entertaining. I whizzed through it. I just have a lot of books and not a lot of space, so I'm letting it go. It's been so sad to let go of some of the indie published books that I liked because I love indie published works. I think they're really important to support. Most of the authors I used to support are now traditionally published. And Letting Go of Mythos by Stephen Fry, I thought this was just okay. I remember giving it 3 stars. I really like Greek mythology. I was really bored with his retelling of it. He didn't put any new spins on it. He just told the tales as they were, and as somebody who already knew a lot about Greek mythology, I knew the tales as they were. So yeah, I didn't really love that one. And Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, I'm getting rid of it. I really don't like this classic. I just don't enjoy reading it. It was not a good one. I kept it on my shelves because this edition is beautiful, but also because I like elements of it. It's really annoying, but the like quote about 6 things before breakfast, I like some of the quotes, I like some of the concepts. I just didn't actually enjoy my reading experience of it. I prefer retellings or films. So I'm unhauling this, but that's because I know that it's in the Penguin cloth-bound collections and I do collect those. So eventually I'll probably get another copy of Alice in Wonderland in the cloth-bound edition. I just don't want to of something I don't particularly like. Let's move on to young adult. This is How You Lose a Time War by Annika Hussain. I read this one. It had great South Asian rep. It was a really fun fake dating situation. It's just with young adult, I sometimes need something a bit deeper, a bit more tangible, especially if I'm going to keep it on my shelves. I read a lot of young adult, so it needs to be spectacular to stay on my shelves. Basically, books need to be spectacular to stay. I did give that one 4 stars, so it was a good read and I highly recommend it. I hope it will find a good home. I have Here the Whole Time by Victor Martins in proof. I actually got a finished copy of this as well, and I unhauled that because I decided I'm not going to read it in the end, so I haven't read this, but I'm also unhauling the proof as well. I'm finally unhauling The Fifth Wave by Rick Yancey. This survived so many unhauls. This was kind of monumental to me during like this certain booktube time. I read this one and I really enjoyed it, and everybody said the sequels were really bad, so I never read beyond this first book. I treated it as a standalone and that worked for me. I enjoyed the film. It had Chloe Grace Moretz in it, who is an actor I'm a big fan of, so it was just like a moment in my life, but I've decided the moment is over and it's gonna go now. In Search of Us by Ava Delaria. This survived many unhauls as well. This is a young adult novel that had a lot to do with the mother-daughter relationship and how that impacted her as a black teenager, and her mother is white, and I really loved this when I read it, and I remember the plot quite distinctly, even though it's been years since I have read this. But I've decided it's just time for it to go. I have so many books, and there's other young adult books that I put above this now, so with love in my heart, I lovingly let it find a new home. I also am unhauling The Wrap in the Dawn by Renee Adiba. I remember getting this in hardback and thinking, my goodness, this book is stunning. It has deckled edges, which is something I actually love. That the spine, the artwork, I just really loved this book as a teenager. I really liked the concept of it as an 1100 Nights retelling. Really loved the first book. Did I ever get my hands on the second book? Did I ever continue the series? No. And I treated it like a standalone, but I just don't have time for one books that I read ages and ages ago on my shelf. Like, there's no space. So it's about time I unhauled it. Oh, it was a time though. Again, that was a period of my life. This as well was really significant to me. This is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Elias Sanez. I know there's been a lot that's come out about this author and I haven't kept up with all of it. I do think, I can't say if it's good or bad or just overblown or whatever. I literally have not looked into it at all. I read this many years ago as a teenager when I was on a book blog. I won this in a giveaway from a book blog that I really liked at the time, and it was the first time I won a book blog giveaway. So it's so many years ago, my teenagerhood, but this really stood out to me as being one of those really quiet, gentle stories about gay boys falling in love, and I treasure it for being so early a part of my like queer reading journey. We're really getting into the nostalgia now, so we're getting rid of Blood Ransom by Sophie Mackenzie. This is the only Sophie Mackenzie book I kept on my shelves because for one of my 30 books in 30 days, I believe the first one I ever vlogged, I reread her books and I didn't enjoy any of them, but I loved her books as a teenager, and this series in particular I thought was very creative. But just because I reread her books and didn't like any of them, this one's gonna go too. I'm also unhauling Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom Riggs. I read the original trilogy of this before I DNF'd the series because it got extended into 6 books, so I never continued past that because I found book 2 and book 3 to be very okay reads. But I remember reading this one and I did like this one, and I remember waking up very early in the morning at about 6 AM and my mum said, we are going to the cinema to watch this film today. And I had these books on my TBR and I was like, oh my gosh, I've got X amount of hours to finish this whole book, and I sat down and I read it from start to finish before we went to the cinema, and then I went and watched it, and it was like, I loved it as a teen. But it was a moment, and it doesn't have to stay a moment anymore. The Colour of Shadows by Philida Shrimpton. But this one I'm just going to unhaul now. I really liked it as well. This one deals a lot with, I think, homelessness this one looked at, and I do think we need more young adult books that look at homelessness in the way that this one does, and it was really insightful and really good. I'm just not keeping it. Similar story, this one again I feel heartwarmed towards When Dimple Met Rishi by Sanjay Menon. I read this for the first 30 books in 30 days that I vlogged, and I buddy read this one with Gaia from Gaia Athena, who doesn't make videos anymore, but I just have a lot of fond memories of this, although I don't actually remember this story very much. And I just think it's a young adult book that I really liked. I've been keeping it for nostalgia reasons rather than for the book reasons, and so it needs to go. The Woods Are Watching by Stephanie Perkins. This was a really fun horror young adult book. It's not very long. I liked it. I read it and I raced through it. I think it was good. It did the like hiking in the middle of the woods with this creepy guy following them very, very well. I don't think I need to keep it on my shelves. I've read a lot of young adult horror since, and some that I've enjoyed more, but I don't think sometimes young adult horror needs to be very deep or anything. Sometimes you just want a little spooky story, and that's what this gave me. Yes, No, Maybe So by Becky Albertalli and Aisha Saeed. I read this one and I liked it. I didn't actually love it when I read it at the time. I think it did a good job of like having the rep of someone who was queer and having the rep of someone who was Jewish, and then it was also like a Muslim person, I think, and it was a really nice tie-in together of the story talking about politics. It was a bit on the nose at times because it had a lot of things to say about political statements, but I do think politically charged YA, there is a place for it. It is important for teenagers to be thinking about politics, so kudos to them for doing it. I'm just not keeping it. Ruin and Rising and Siege and Storm by Leigh Bardugo. I ummed and awed about this for many an unhaul, and now it's actually going. So I read Shadow and Bone trilogy when I was a teenager, and it shook me to the core. Like, fine, make me your villain. Those words, young me was shaken to my core. And I still love the Darkling. I still consider myself Darkling trash. If there was, well, Queen Lavanna is #1, but I would also love to rule the world on the Darkling's arm. Alina made choices. I will stand by the fact that I love Shadow and Bone. I gave that book 5 stars and it's still on my shelf, but I have that in paperback and I have these 2 in hardback, and I will say Siege and Storm is the most boring second book I've ever read. I snoozed my way through this. As a teenager I was quite easy to please, but even I found this book incredibly boring, and I stand by the fact that Ruin and Rising is one of the worst endings to this book series that it could have had. I didn't like the way the love triangle went. I didn't like what happened to Alina at the end, and so I was just not a fan of the finishing end or of this particular book. Date Me, Bryson Keller by Kevin Van Wy. I buddy read this. It was a really nice fake dating read. It took me a while to get into it because I wasn't into the writing style, and of all the things I remember about this book is that it took me a while to get into it. So it's leaving. It's going. The next one's a bit sad for me to get rid of, and that's A Song of Wraith and Ruins by Roseanne A. Brown. And I read this one and I really, really liked it. I thought it was a fantastic beginning to a young adult fantasy series. I love the mythology, I love the storyline, how it really went there when I thought this book would dodge around it. I appreciated it. But I read the second book and I didn't love it as much, and I didn't really like that one, so I've already unhauled the second one, but I was keeping this one because it did the thing that I want so many books to do but they never do. But it's just like I'm never going to reread this, so I shouldn't just keep the first one. I'm so sad letting that one go. I'm so sad. Tyler Johnson Was Here by J. Coles. I read this one and I liked it at the time. At the time I was also thinking this is trying its best to do what The Hate U Give has already done for me. And so it's always been overshadowed in my mind by The Hate U Give, and it kind of still is. I like The Hate U Give more, but I do think it's still telling an important story about police violence for teenagers, but then through the lens specifically of social media, and that's what The Hate U Give didn't do. So I think I'm just going to let this one go, but I really love the cover. I thought it was gorgeous and it was a nice read, just not one I need to keep on reading. And then last but not least, I have a book I got for uni, and that was The Bone Snatcher by Charlotte Salter. This is kind of like a creepy, I don't know, it bridges the gap between middle grade and young adult, so that really early but still mature child age. It's creepy, it's got a house with lots of nooks and crannies, and it was a really good read. I just don't think I need to keep it on my shelves. I think I gave this 4 stars. So now what we're going to do is picture books, graphics and poetry, of which there is not that many because I love these things and tend to keep them on my shelves. So first of all, we've got the kind of picture book, which is Sea Prayer by Kathleen Torsini. I've already read this and I liked it, but I mostly read it for the sake of I like a picture book, but I love Kathleen Torsini's novels. It was me reading everything that he's ever published. Like this completed it and I liked it, but I don't find it very memorable and I can easily pass this one along. Allen Ginsberg's Howl, Kaddish and Other Poems. I read this in uni. I wasn't a big fan of Allen Ginsberg's poetry. It's just not my stylistic choice. Poetry is very personal. So while I say like it wasn't poetry for me, there's definitely going to be people who really love this one. So I'm going to remove my tabs and pass it along. We've also got The Last Count of Monte Cristo, which is a graphic novel retelling in Afrofuturism vibes of The Count of Monte Cristo. Fantastic in concept. The artwork in this one, gorgeous. The colour palette in this one, gorgeous, as you can see from this cover. 10 out of 10 for those things. However, I was a bit gutted to see that it kept the slavery in there. I don't think this necessarily needed it. I didn't really like the depiction of women, especially what the women were wearing compared to the full body gear that the men had to wear in this. I was just like, why? And I did like the concepts, like setting it in a climate change world and how it impacted the original tale. Fantastic. I really think it did a good job with the retelling elements. I just think it was very, very rushed towards the end because it's a really big book, but they had to condense it down. So I had mixed feelings about this one, but I have no doubt that somebody else is going to find this and be able to absolutely love it. I Entered Without Words by Jodie Gladding. So you may know, if you've been here on this channel for a while, there was one unhaul I did where I had this in the unhaul pile and at the last minute I decided to keep it because I did really like it. But I am going to unhaul it properly this time because even though I really did like it, I just don't have space for everything I liked on my shelves anymore. This one is an odd size. I don't like how it sits on the shelf, but this is a testament to this only time that I've had super abstract poetry and I've really liked it. So that is monumental that this book achieved that. Adulthood is a Myth by Sarah Anderson. I had fun with these. They are great. I don't have space on my shelves. I'm not going to keep like a fun little book. I just don't need to. Alison by Lizzie Stewart. This was a graphic novel about a woman's journey with her life, especially with her love of art. It's all kind of greys because it's really like sad and it's a really intense book historically, and then it plays with colour in a really nice way by the end. I liked it. I just didn't love it enough for me to keep it on my shelves when I have no more space left, like zero space. There is no more space on my shelves, and I know without a doubt I'm still gonna haul in books. So we have Women Eat Me Whole by Ama Asante Odiaka. This is a poetry collection. I liked this. It has some really good poetry, and I think for people who don't read too much poetry, it can be a very good starting point. It's got lots of black themes, a lot of feminism themes. Again, space, and I've got poetry collections I love a bit more that I'm keeping. And then the last one for graphic novels is The Oracle Code by Marika Nijkamp and Manuel Praetano, and I really liked it. I think it did a good job with the wheelchair and disability representation while still being in the superhero Batman world. So I really am glad that I read this and I really liked it. I just think there'll be other people who enjoy it even more than me. And then last but not least, we're going on to the middle grade here. So we have A Girl of Two Worlds by Lorna Eglin. This was one book that my mum got me when I was literally a child. That's how long I've had this. I just don't need to keep it anymore. I'm never going to reread it. When Life Gives You Mangoes by Corinne Getton. I really like this. It's set in Jamaica. There's so few books I read that are set in Jamaica, let alone middle grade, and it touched on it seems very, very well, and I'm passing it along to Otis's future bookshelves. Otis is my nephew. He is super cute, and I can't wait to be adding Jamaican set books onto his shelf because that's part of his heritage too. We have Frankenstiltskin by Joseph Coolho and Freya Hartus. I really like this story. I thought it was very, very creative. It is a bit young for my usual typical middle grade, so I'm going to pass it along to a child who really likes it. I prefer my middle grade a bit older. We have Wonder by R.J. Palacio. This is very bittersweet to me. I read this when I was of the age of this, and it's about a boy who has a facial difference. It's not own voices, but I do remember it being very, very good representation at the time, and it really started me on my journey. It was like when I was starting my journey of reading disability fiction actively as a young teen, and I really related to a character called Olivia, who is the sibling to someone who's disabled. I'm a sibling to someone who's disabled, so I related to a lot of those elements there. Not all of them, because I knew my mum loved me, but a lot of things I did relate to. I just think I'm further along in my disability journey, and again I can add this to Otis's future shelves. Ramasia by Radia Hafiza. I read this in proof. It's a fairy tale retelling mashup story that promises feminist fairy tales, also with a bit of Muslim representation in there. Really liked this. It was really fun and it was really good. However, it is a series. I'm not going to be continuing the series. I just haven't actively done that. It takes a lot for me to continue a middle grade series, so passing that along. Mouse called Mika by Matt Haig. This is kind of like a spin-off one that relates to the Boy Called Christmas series. I love A Boy Who Called Christmas. That's still there on my shelves, but I'm just letting go of this one because it was an animal-based book. If you know me, I don't get along very well with books around animals, so I'm passing this along. It might also go on Otis's shelves. I think it could be a good place for it. Very quickly, before my battery dies, the last two books we have are Seriously Hamlet, which is Hamlet in text form. It was really fun and silly and a really nice retelling, but I just don't need to keep it. I don't have space. And then this very funny adult picture book, which I might give to my sister and brother-in-law who are parents, or I might just donate it for someone else to have a good laugh about it. But there you have it. Those are the 75 books that are leaving my shelves. I'm sad to see some of them go, but all of them are going with love, and I hope they can find new homes. Please let me know in the comment section down below what was the last book you gave away, or if you don't unhaul books, what was a book that you have like a memory tied to that you really like. I'd love to hear some like bookish memories, because some of these books that are leaving my collection have memories in my heart as well. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. We'll be back in front of my usual bookshelves and set up for the next video, and you know what they always say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!